Hey, this is Nate with Bright Agritech, here to answer more questions for you guys on the second episode of Ask the Doctor. We got a lot of questions, so the new way to submit questions, the only way we're going to be able to get to them is through this form right here. What is the best argument for your ZipGrow system? Why is it better than a normal rack system? This is from Renee. That's a really good question, Renee. When we first started designing ZipGrow towers, we were very familiar with all of the other equipment on the market, and we were really unhappy with the labor costs because labor is the big thing in all of these systems. So one thing we wanted to do is make sure we addressed all of those labor costs and reduce those. And the easiest way to do that and kind of still get super high numbers when it comes to production per square foot was to grow up and to grow on our rack system. So either in greenhouses or in our warehouse production systems, we get way more than those other systems. And the nice thing is everything is accessible from the ground for growers. So instead of having to get on a scissor lift or go up a ladder to maintain and deal with things, we've designed stuff that are actually designed for the users. And this is a big distinction that I think is worth making, because many of the other systems out there are designed solely just to grow the product. And that's not good enough because your time is worth money. And so when we approached the ZipGrow tower, we approached it with the idea that we want to design something that not only lowers the cost for our producers when it comes to other operational aspects like growing more per square foot, but also really lowered the cost of labor. So that's really kind of my argument for ZipGrow towers over traditional rack systems. And you'll find that most of the new hydroponic startups right now are using ZipGrow towers for those reasons, because they recognize that labor is their biggest problem. It's not growing the produce, that's easy. It's not selling the produce, that's actually not that hard either, especially kind of with some of the support we offer. It's really about how do we reduce labor and how do we make this more possible for someone to do on a small scale with only so many hours in the day. This is from Alejandra. Hi, Dr. Nate. I'm a one-woman urban agriculture startup, and so far I love working with your towers. There's just one issue. I can't manage to get the growing matrix into some of the towers without someone's help. So whenever I need to plant something, I have to wait for backup. Inserting the growing media sandwich looks easy in your videos. Any tips? Alejandra, this is a really common issue, especially with our commercial grade media, because it's cut to a fairly large dimension. And the goal there is to actually make it last as long as possible for you. We sell two different types of media. There's a commercial cut, and then there's the easy pull. And basically the easy pull is a little bit skinnier, so it makes it easier to pull, but it doesn't last as long. So the goal with the commercial stuff is that as the plant roots kind of tear at the fibers of the media, and as it's pulled in and pulled out and used over time, it compresses and it kind of breaks down a little bit. The goal is to make that last for 7 to 8 years, if not 9 or 10 years. That's the goal. So we tend to cut it a little bit bigger, but it does usually take 1 or 2 cycles to break it in. So if you just started planting your towels, they will be hard to pull. Definitely. If you don't care about really a long life on the media, then go with the easy pull for sure. But if you're using the commercial, know that because it's overcut, it's gonna take a while. But after 2 or 3 plantings, that's gonna slide right in and slide right out of your towers, no problem. And you'll be able to take care of that by yourself with no issue. In the meantime, definitely find a friend to help. And if you think that the media is maybe overcut, let us know and we'll send you new stuff. So another thing that happens is, more organic matter builds up in that media. And as it gets wet, it makes it easier to pull. So if you're pulling dry media, I would certainly try pulling it a little bit, dunk it in some water, get it a little bit wet, and then pull it in. It should make it a lot easier. And of course, if you're in an aquaponic system, there's all sorts of grime and solids and other things in there that kind of lubricate that media as it slides into the tower. What is the difference between Bright Agritech matrix media and other matte media such as Metala or Japanese filter mat? As a follow-up question, what is the difference between commercial matrix media and easy pull matrix media? Thanks for all the resources you provide, from Frederick. That is a really good question, Frederick, and I'm happy to answer it. Just to start off, the commercial matrix media is a thicker cut. So it's designed to give you more material so that it lasts you longer in a really abusive commercial setting. Like I was saying earlier, most of our stuff lasts at least 7-8 years, sometimes as long as 10+ years. So that media is cut for commercial, heavy-duty, abusive kind of applications. The easy pull is more for like home growers that want something a little bit simpler, and they want something that pulls really easily, and they don't care if it lasts them 10 years. They just want something to last them 1 year or 2 years. So that's the difference there. Now, as far as the difference between what we use and other matte medias like Metallo or Japanese filter matte, it's a different material, it has higher shear strength, and it has more flexibility. It also has much higher specific surface area. So when I was designing the towers, I looked at all of these different materials. I went through a lot of them, and I just wasn't happy with the way that water flowed through them, with the way they captured solids, because this has to be both a mechanical filter and a biofilter, and it has to resist damage from plant roots, and it has to be basically UV resistant to last a really long time. So the problem with like Metallo is a high density or low density polyethylene most of the time, is that it doesn't last that long, especially in UV light, and that's a problem for most of our growers. It's also a lot harder to work with. It's not quite as flexible. It's an inferior material when it comes down to it. And don't I know it, because I wish I could use Metallo. It's a lot cheaper than the stuff that we end up using. But it's just not as durable. It just doesn't work as well. It doesn't grow plants as well, and we just can't use it for those reasons. So the stuff that we use, it's a different material. It's actually polyester fiber, so it's recycled water bottles essentially, but we actually coat it with a binder that protects it from UV. And it also has very high shear strength, so over time as those plant roots kind of work their way through there and they start tearing away at that fiber, this particular fiber that we use resists that kind of damage and lasts you a long time as a result. So that's the big difference between matrix media and the other stuff. The other stuff would be a lot cheaper for us to use, but it's just not as high a quality and it won't last as long. If your ZipGrow device is to be delivered to the customer, the same must be returned also. Who will weigh and price it? This is the first kind of live delivery. Who will cut the product from the tower? The customer? This is from Paul. There's a whole bunch of different models out there. You can pay by tower, you can pay by weight. So examples of these would be, if you are the grower, you can approach Whole Foods and you can say, Whole Foods is going to cost you $40 a tower every time I bring you a tower of greens. It's going to cost you $60 a tower every time I bring you a tower of herbs. And Whole Foods says, cool. They get out the pocketbook and they write you a check. Another option is for folks to basically log it at the counter. So if you are in a modern enough store and their scales are sensitive enough, the customer will go, they'll cut what they want, they'll put it in a baggie, they'll take it up front, they'll weigh it, and in their system, they will track how much of each product they've sold, so how much of your product they've sold, and they will pay you based on how much of that they've sold. So if they're selling, herbs for $3 an ounce, and a customer comes through and they buy an ounce of herbs, you're wholesaling for $2 an ounce. It goes into their system, and the system tells them that they need to cut you a check for $2 for that ounce. Make sense? The other way, and this has gotten some traction, is the grower will actually bring in clamshells with a barcode. So they'll put the barcode on the clamshell, and it's basically an all-you-can-pack-in-there kind of a deal. So for the customer, you cut as much of this as you want, and you put it in the clamshell, and then you just take it up front and you pay for it. And the store actually, they're not buying towers at that point. They're not buying the produce from you at that point. They're just buying the clamshells. And the clamshells basically represent, as much basil or chives or whatever they can pack in there, a mixture. So that's actually kind of my favorite model, honestly, because it gives the consumer more choice. And the goal with any model is to give the producers more value, to give the sellers more value, and to give the customers more value. And anytime you can deliver value at every single point along the supply chain, you've got a winner. I've been watching your YouTube videos featuring Bayberry Fresh Farms in Fort Collins, Colorado. Colorado has made it very easy to do direct sales via the Colorado Cottage Food Act. However, it does not allow for resale. What exactly did Bayberry Fresh have to do to make their products available for grocery stores and the like? Thanks in advance for any help with this issue. This is a really good question, Brad, a really good question. And it's one that we have answered in detail. We have blog posts, we have videos, we have webinars recorded, and we have podcasts all on this subject, namely compliance. And if you're one of our upstart farmers, then you also know that we offer a compliance packet to all of our upstart farmers, how to get into Whole Foods, how to get into Safeway, how to get into these grocery stores, and what kind of compliance issues and hoops you need to jump through to do that. So what do you have to do to get into those grocery stores? It's all out there at this point. We've got lots of resources. Please do check them out. It's probably the most valuable list of resources on the internet. No one else has really, other people have dealt with it, but no one's actually put together packets like we've put together to make this as comprehensive and as easy to use and as simple to follow as in do this step, do that step, kind of a thing. So check out these resources and please do let us know if you have any questions, but I guarantee we've probably answered most of the questions you have in this regard already. From David is, can we read your research papers? Yes, David, you can. They are published. If you can find them, you kind of have to, cruise through Nexus Lexis for a long time to find it. Cruise through some of the academic journal, sites. I don't even know what they're called. What are they called? Place where they send all the journals. It's online journals.
Is it like JSTOR?
Yeah, like JSTOR or I can't even remember at this point.
You don't have a link?
I don't.
I had a link. So I had a link, but it was like this crazy thing where you had to go through like link after link after link to find it. So the crux of the issue is that I got tired of trying to send people to find like my dissertation or my thesis or whatever. So I know that we sell the dissertation on the website, and I think we actually sell it for cheaper than the academic publishing sites or whatever we sell it. So it is on the website. It is my dissertation. If there's some really good stuff in there, and there's also some great stuff for putting yourself to sleep at night. So if you are curious, but you also suffer from insomnia, it is worth buying. Doc Nate, I have a system that has been up and running for a year with goldfish in it. I tried to transfer the tilapia, and my tilapia started dying. Why? If the goldfish did well, why are the tilapia dying, and what do I have to do to transfer my tilapia to my system? This is from Lavender. Lavender, that's a good question. Almost any system that will support goldfish will support tilapia just fine. So usually when there's shock during transplant, it's something you're actually doing during the transplant, or it's the temperature of your system. So my guess is it's probably a temperature issue. I would test your water temperatures to make sure you're transferring them to a very similar water temperature that you're removing them from. And so I'd do that first. My guess is you're putting them in some pretty cold water, they're shocking, and then they're dying. That's my guess, but it could be a host of things. Number 6, Dr. Nate. Firstly, I would like to say that I've been very inspired by your work and info you share. Thanks. Question. I have successfully set up a small AP system, 20 to 40 gallons, and I feel that I'm ready to start building larger 200 plus gallon systems. I'm having trouble determining the best fish, alternative to tilapia, due to restrictions in Northern California. Do you have any suggestions for other edible fish? Thank you. This is from Rick. Thanks, Rick. That's a really nice thing to say. We appreciate that you guys enjoy the materials you put out there and all the time and energy we spend on it. As far as fish go, in Northern California, it's kind of rough. You can't use tilapia, and they're really the workhorse of so many aquaponic systems. But there are lots of other great options out there, including things like bluegill. If you're in kind of a colder climate, they're in Northern California. Yellow perch, trout you can do, catfish, channel cats are very popular fish. What I would do is I would contact your local game and fish office, and you would ask them about some of the nurseries in your area, hatcheries, and see if you can get some local fish stock, something like that. People are growing bass, people are growing all sorts of sunfish. There's lots of options out there. that will handle kind of colder temperatures as well as warm ones. Channel cats, a lot of people work with channel cats. So check it out, see if you can get any channel catfish there locally. I guarantee you'll be pretty happy about them. And we've got a post here on channel catfish from Elise Landis of TC Links out of Florida. She's kind of an expert with channel catfish in aquaponic systems, so check that out. Second question comes from Adam, and this is, I'm a big fan of salmon sashimi. It's been a dream of mine to have a home aquaponic system from which I can harvest a great sushi dinner. Is salmon an option for aquaponics? How would you set that up? And what would an aquaponic system produce? And would an aquaponic system produce sashimi quality fish? From Adam. Adam, sure. I mean, it will definitely produce sashimi quality fish, but it's not going to be producing salmon for you anytime soon, unfortunately. Salmon are tough, really tough. You can do trout, but that's about as close as you're going to get to salmon. They're just way too hard to raise, and they'd be freshwater. I mean, most salmon, like saltwater, you know, a little bit later in their life. But you could do a freshwater salmon, I suppose, if you had a huge system and a lot of resources to devote to it, but I wouldn't recommend going down that path. I just save your money and work with trout. But the question is, why can't I keep my pH up in my aquaponic system? I do not overfeed my fish. The way solids have not built up, water gets constant aeration, yet I can't keep the pH above 6.0, which is a guess at best because the water test kit I have will not read below 6.0. So, if your pH won't come above 6.0, that means your nitrification is probably cranking along, and it probably means that you have really low carbonates in your source water. So that's not actually a bad thing. You don't want your pH to drop too quickly, but by and large, pH around 6.0 is just fine, and I don't think you have a problem. So if your pH is trending down towards like 5.5, then yeah, maybe you need to think about raising it a little bit, but by and large, a pH of 6 is just fine. We run our system there all the time. Question number 7. We have a greenhouse in the Appalachian Mountains of Georgia and are using both greenhouse towers or ZipGrow towers and Dutch buckets hydroponically. What is the best, easiest way to make sure nutrients are correct, and is there a way of monitoring this remotely? This is from Gary. That's a great question, Gary. The best way to monitor your nutrients in any hydroponic system is just EC, so measuring electrical conductivity. That's just a measurement of the number of ions in your solution. But what it tells us in hydroponic systems with formulated solutions is what the nutrient content of that water is. So how many nutrients are in that water, what is available to your plants, that's what measuring EC tells us. So yes, you can also monitor it remotely. There are all sorts of control systems. These are called auto-dosing systems. And what they do is they will dose your system with the correct amount of fertilizer as it's needed based on the EC and based on the pH. Okay, so if you get one of these systems, we use like IntelliDose from their AutoGrow is the name of the company, and they have a product called IntelliDose. We use that, and it works really great. So it'll keep your system running even when you're not there, and it's going to tell you EC, and it's going to allow you to monitor it remotely if you want. Next question. Hi, Dr. Nate. How do you measure phosphorus in aquaponics water? I've watched the video where you discuss phosphorus requirements, especially for peppers, cucumbers, etc. So I had those same plants, and they sucked all of the phosphorus out of my media-based system. I added organic rock phosphate, but I'm pretty sure I overdid it, as vegetables all started to look wonky. So how can I measure it so that I can track my amendments? P.S. I've got my first ZipGrow tower running above my media beds, and like what it's doing in Michigan in the winter. This is from Paul. Cool, Paul. I'm glad that the tower is working out for you. They're a lot of fun to work with, and I think during the winter time, they can be especially useful when you're trying to get a little bit more production out of your space and not pay some hefty heating bills. So as far as measuring phosphorus goes, it's kind of tough. You can buy, there are some little electronic handheld meters or lab size meters out there that you can buy, but it's going to cost you a couple $100. And I'm not sure it's necessarily worth it for phosphorus because it's not commonly lacking or in excess. So what I would say is probably the cheapest route is if you have a lot of questions, just send a water sample off to your local or a tissue sample off to your local extension office, your university extension office, and have them, usually cost you 20, 30 bucks, and they'll tell you kind of what the tissue analysis is or what the phosphorus content of the water is. And that's going to help you determine what your next steps are. But probably if you've overdosed on phosphorus, it will work itself out. I wouldn't worry about it too much. That's actually really rare, and my guess is it's probably not it's probably not excess phosphorus. It's probably something else, because that's just really, really rare in these systems, even if you have put in too much rock phosphate. This is number 10 from Emilio, and it's a little long, so bear with me. Hi, Dr. Nate. I have started out with a hydroponic implementation of ZipGrow towers and use liquid fertilizers. This is handy for now, given that I'm not mixing large amounts of nutrient solutions. This is less than 80 liters. At what point does it become economically and practically feasible to design an irrigation system that uses solid fertilizers and mixing tanks and injectors and such? Right now, I'm the weak link in my garden design. If I fall ill or leave within days, my plants will start to suffer. However, designing an automated feeding system for hydroponics seems very costly to build and adds additional complexity. Have you seen cheap ways of automating nutrient solution prep and integration into an irrigation system? Any thoughts you might have would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for giving us a platform to ask questions. Have a great day. Thanks, Emilio. That's actually a pretty good question. There are ways to do it without having an auto-dosing system, okay? So like an auto-dosing system is kind of the ultimate end, right? It's a computer that basically just doses your system as needed. But it's gonna cost you, at least 1,600 bucks for a good one, at least. And that's kind of more of a small scale one. So if you're just a home grower and you're just looking for a way to simplify nutrient mixing, start with putting just a float valve on your system so it tops off automatically from your hose. So when you leave, at least your plants will have water, even if you're not putting nutrients in or mixing nutrients in by hand. Another thing to consider is something called the crack key method, and this is basically a method of hydroponic growing where you pre-mix all of the solution and the plants just kind of consume it at a steady state. And you're not mixing new solution in, it's just consuming all of the solution. And then once the solution is consumed, you can either top it back off again or you harvest the plants. That's the crack key method. It's super simple, look it up, and you might have some interesting ideas. When we run our green walls, we actually run a variation of the crack key method in our top-off tank. So we'll actually pre-mix all of our solution. It's a little bit weaker than most growers will run it at. And then we just run that pre-mixed solution, and it's practically a float of waste because the plants are consuming large amounts of that solution, and it just continually fills up, tops off the system as it's consumed. So there are a lot of different ways to do it, but certainly the best place to start is just putting a float valve in, so that even if you're gone, if you're hand mixing or hand dosing your system, your plants stay watered so they're not dying. Your plants can go for a number of days without any nutrient solution in the system, so don't worry about them on that front. Thanks so much for watching. There were tons of questions and not enough time. For more answers to your questions, check out our blog and also check out our YouTube channel. We've got hundreds of videos now on all sorts of subjects regarding aquaponics and hydroponics. And as always, tune in every single Monday and we'll repost these videos answering your questions.